Thanks for joining us. You're watching our mid-morning edition of Arirang News on this Thursday, April 16th, coming to you live from Seoul. I'm Shin Se-min. Before we begin, these are the stories we're following at this hour. The general election results are in, and a huge win for the ruling Democratic Party of Korea as they secure a solid majority of seats in the National Assembly. Plus, a surprisingly high turnout as tens of millions of voters flowed into polling stations despite the coronavirus pandemic. More online classes open in South Korea as the nation inches closer to normalcy as the curve flattens on COVID-19. 4 million students will go online to start their new academic year. Plus, COVID-19 has infected over 2 million people across the world, with the U.S. the worst-hit nation, this according to the official figures. The New York State governor even issues an executive order for people to wear face masks. It's the morning after the big election here in South Korea, and it was so far the first major election anywhere else in the world since the start of the COVID-19 pandemic. But despite all that, South Korea saw its highest voter turnout for a general election since 1992 at over 66%. It is little after 10 a.m. in Korea, and we have now a better picture of what the next parliament is going to look like, one dominated by the ruling Democratic Party of Korea. Now, for a closer look at the election and what we can expect going forward, we have Arirang News' Oh Jung-hee joining us in studio with me. Welcome, Jung-hee.
Good morning, Se-min.
So we hear it's all over the place. We hear that the Democratic Party of Korea is eyeing some 180 seats in 300-seat parliament, the first for the ruling Democratic Party since the constitutional amendment in the late 1980s, right? Tell us more.
Right, Se-min. So all in all, the election's a big win for the ruling Democratic Party and a crushing defeat for the main opposition United Future Party. According to the National Election Commission, among 253 seats for district lawmakers, the ruling Democratic Party is to take 163 seats, while the main opposition United Future Party is to take 84. Among the 47 seats up for grabs through proportional representation, their satellite parties, the Civil Together Party and the Future Korea Party, are to take 16 and 17 respectively. The Justice Party takes 4 and the People's Party 3. These numbers are as of 9 a.m. this morning. Therefore, the ruling Democratic Party and its satellite party will take 180 seats out of 300, well over half. The United Future Party's leader Hwang Kyo-won resigned last night, saying that he'll take responsibility for his party's defeat. Let's cut to the victory and defeat speeches by major candidates from the ruling and main opposition parties.
The nation has given the ruling party the responsibility to overcome the COVID-19 disaster and handle the global crisis. I will fulfill the ruling party's responsibility.
As I promised, I take responsibility for the party's defeat, and I will step down from my post.
So from yesterday's general election, we had some of the key candidates that we had our eyes fixed on. How did they fare in terms of the election in those key battleground districts?
For that, we'll have to start with Jongno District. It's a highly symbolic district because the winners of the district have been considered as having a greater possibility of becoming president one day. At this election, 2 former prime ministers ran for this district, and the ruling Democratic Party candidate Lee Na-kyun won against his conservative rival Hwang Kyo-won with over 58% support. Other than Lee, other Democratic Party candidates who served in the President Moon Jae-in administration all won. Former presidential spokesperson Ko Min-jung won Seoul's Gwangjin-B district, and former presidential secretary for state affairs Yoon Gun-young won Seoul's Guro-B district. Meanwhile, Tae-gu-min or Tae-young-ho will become the first ever North Korean defector to win a seat in South Korea's National Assembly. He was once North Korea's number 2 diplomat at the London embassy, but defected to South Korea in 2016 and ran for Gangnam A district.
the first North Korean defector at the National Assembly. Now, let's touch upon the newly introduced 50% mixed member proportional representation system. Initially, that was implemented to diversify the nation's parliament in terms of parties, but did that serve its purpose?
Nice question, Jaein, and my answer to that would have to be no, because this system was adopted to give as many seats as possible to as many different parties as possible within the National Assembly, because the South Korean politics has been, dominated by the two largest parties, the conservatives and the liberals, and the other minor parties didn't really have much say. But the system didn't really work out that way this time. The largest political parties created so-called satellite parties that put forward candidates only for proportional representation. So their candidates would belong to parties with different names, but basically with the same goal. This in turn rather solidified the power grip of the two largest parties and failed to diversify the parliament. Some pundits even call this a retreat in South Korea's democracy.
So all in all, a major victory for the ruling Democratic Party of Korea. It was somewhat expected towards the end of the campaign period, but how do you evaluate the outcome?
That's right. Well, Jaein, the general view is that the South Korean public decided to, they chose stability over keeping check of the government. That is, the nation decided to support Moon Jae-in administration rather than challenging it. The South Korean government seems to be successfully handling the COVID-19 outbreak in the country, seeing fewer and fewer daily new cases. Experts say the public wants to encourage the government to work harder through the pandemic and eventually revive the economy.
All right, we have the answers to the election of the outcome, but so now what? How will this turnout eventually influence the remaining 2 years of the Moon administration going forward?
Well, Jaein, obviously, as you know, the ruling party is going to be huge in the next National Assembly. And this means, actually, in fact, much bigger than it was in the previous parliament. So this will definitely give a boost to the ruling Democratic Party in terms of helping the Moon Jae-in administration working out state affairs. And it's expected that there will be no lame duck status for President Moon Jae-in. The ruling party will be able to pass legislations more easily than it used to before, because it holds well over half of the parliamentary seats and won't really need cooperation from minor parties. The first thing on the agenda is likely to be allocating a supplementary budget to provide emergency relief payments to households affected by the coronavirus. Jaein.
Thank you, Ari Chung-hee, with that run through of the 2020 general election.
My pleasure.
And President Moon Jae-in says South Korea's highly acclaimed response to the COVID-19 outbreak has its roots in the lessons learned from the 2014 Sewol-ho ferry disaster. Taking it to social media on Thursday morning to mark the 6th-year anniversary of the ferry sinking, President Moon said the tragedy showed how deeply connected the public is, adding that the people are again showing they are one in the fight against COVID-19. President Moon added that people's lives may look very different post-outbreak, stressing that the government will prepare thoroughly while working hard to prevent such accidents from recurring. The president also sent his condolences to the bereaved families of the 304 victims of the Sewol-ho sinking, adding his administration will do its best to get the truth about the incident. The COVID-19 pandemic has forced schools around the world to consider teaching students online, and some nations have struggled to cope with the upheaval, but middle and high school seniors in South Korea started their semester online last week, and so far, so good. Today, classes for the other grades in middle and high schools and the older grades in elementary school start their online homeschooling. Our Choi Jung-yoon with the details.
After waiting for more than a month, the majority of students in South Korea are finally starting classes. First and second graders in high school and middle school, as well as fourth to sixth graders in elementary school, begin their first semester on Thursday with online classes. Students in their final years of middle and high school already started classes last week, while students in first to third grades of elementary school will start on April 20th. So from Thursday, some 4 million students nationwide will be sitting in front of their computers to take online classes, all at the same time. Students will log on to one of 2 online class platforms provided by the Education Ministry to check for attendance. Classes are run based on 3 types using real-time video conferencing, pre-recorded video lessons, and assignments. There are concerns whether the never-tried-before mass online education can run without technical glitches. The Education Ministry has advised schools to divide their classes across the 2 attendance platforms, and it will provide individual URLs for each class to log in to avoid connection delays. With the pushback in the education calendar, South Korea's college entrance exam known as Suneung will also be postponed for 2 weeks and will take place on December 3rd. 최정윤, 아리랑 뉴스.
The South Korean government will draw up an additional supplementary budget worth more than $5 billion to counter the economic fallout of the COVID-19 pandemic. Prime Minister Chung Se-kyun will be revising the budget plan during a meeting Thursday to lift the economic burden on households caused by the outbreak. Now, this is on top of an almost $10 billion extra budget executed in mid-March. The additional budget, although in its early stages, is likely to include ways to financially support families of 4 or more members that are in their lowest 70% income bracket. If approved, the extra budget will be the 5th under the Moon administration, following ones to stimulate job creation and tackle fine dust pollution. Over 2 million cases and over 134,000 deaths. That is the global picture of the COVID-19 pandemic across the world. Of that, the U.S. remains the hardest hit, especially in the state of New York. And Europe is also still suffering, but some countries are preparing for a steady return to normality. Our Kim Bo-kyung with more.
The total number of confirmed COVID-19 cases globally has surpassed 2 million. And the U.S. is the hardest hit country with at least 630,000 cases. This, according to the latest figures from Johns Hopkins University. With New York being the epicenter, New York State Governor Andrew Cuomo has issued an executive order saying all New Yorkers must wear a face mask in public when not social distancing. Europe still accounts for around half the cases, yet a handful of countries there are slowly lifting lockdowns as the curve flattens. Italy, once the epicenter of the virus worldwide, on Wednesday saw its lowest number of new daily cases in a month, confirming around 2,600 cases. The containment measures that banned movement in the country and ordered non-essential businesses to halt are due to last at least until May 3rd, but the government is reportedly considering easing these measures. German Chancellor Angela Merkel said on Wednesday that the country is having, quote, fragile intermediate success, and that although it is going to have social distancing rules stay in place until at least May 3rd, some shops with good hygiene could reopen next week.
What we have achieved is an intermediate success, no more and no less. The factors determining this success are moving in the right direction, but we do not have a lot of room for maneuver. We must keep focused and keep going.
Yet, she emphasized citizens to keep 1.5 meters of distance between each other, to stay alone in public, and recommended that they have their protective face masks on when on public transport or in shops. Kim Bo-kyung, Arirang News.
The head of the World Health Organization says he regrets this week's decision by U.S. President Donald Trump to halt U.S. funding to the UN health body. Trump said the WHO had made a, quote, disastrous decision to oppose travel restrictions from China when the outbreak was in its infancy. Our Lee Seung-jae has more on this high-stakes blame game taking place between Washington and the WHO.
Slamming the WHO's response to the COVID-19 pandemic, U.S. President Donald Trump on Tuesday announced that the U.S. was halting funding for the UN Health Agency. The head of the WHO has now responded, expressing regret over President Trump's decision.
The United States of America has been a long-standing and generous friend to WHO, and we hope it will continue to be so. We regret the decision of the President of the United States to order a halt in funding to the World Health Organization.
He added it's through the support from the people and the government of the U.S. that the WHO works to improve the health of many of the world's poorest and most vulnerable. With the U.S. being the WHO's biggest financial backer, the UN Health Agency is reviewing the impact Trump's move will have, saying they'll continue to work with other countries to fill any financial gaps it may face so that it can keep working uninterrupted. However, with the WHO and the U.S. at odds with each other, the UN Health Agency chief warned that such division will allow COVID-19 to exploit the cracks between the two, hinting it might slow down the fight against the virus. The WHO chief still stressed that the focus will be on stopping the virus and saving lives. As the WHO's largest single donor, the U.S. had contributed between $400 to $500 million annually to the Geneva-based agency in recent years. President Trump's decision was met with opposition from many world leaders and UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres. 이승재, Arirang News.
Good morning. It's going to feel more like late May than mid-April in western parts of the country. So Seoul and Daejeon will get up to 25 degrees Celsius, while regions in the east will have comparatively cooler conditions, Busan just topping out at 18 degrees this afternoon. But those of us in the capital region and Chungcheongbuk-do province will need to be aware of polluted air during the day, while a dry weather advisory is still in place for much of the country. But thankfully, nationwide welcome rain is in store for Friday to ease the dryness in the air, but will also bring down the highs. That's Korea for you, and here's the international weather for news around the world.
And that's all the news we have at this hour on Arirang News. As always, thank you for watching and goodbye.